Hey boys and girls, now that we have cut our correct length of yarn, we've tied our knot near the end of the yarn, and we put our stitching needle on the other end, it is time to start sewing. So quick little demonstration for you as we get started. When we start sewing, we always want to start by coming up from the back. And the reason for this is we want all of our yucky stuff to kind of be on the back of our fabric. So our knots and our tucking under, all of that stuff we want to be on the back. So our nice sewing and stitching is on the front. So I take my sewing needle, I start from underneath my fabric, finding where I want to start, and I'm going to poke that needle about halfway up. Now once that needle is halfway up, I move my hand on top of the fabric, I wiggle that through, and then once I see my yarn, I make sure that I'm holding on to my yarn and my needle, and I'm going to pull that through until I can feel my knot hit on the back of my fabric. So once I have that, now I'm on the top of my fabric, and I want to poke that needle straight down. Once it's halfway down, I put my hand underneath, making sure I'm holding on to that yarn, and I'm going to pull until I see my first stitch. Now when I look at these stitches, I want to make sure that it's not so big that I could stick my finger underneath, and our goal is to keep our sewing stitches about the same size the whole way along. So now I look and I know that my yarn is underneath, and on the back you can see that I have my knot and all of that stuff that I don't want to show on the front. And that means that I'm going to poke it up. So sometimes it takes a couple little pokes to get that in the right spot, keeping those fingers out of the way, and I pull until I can feel that yarn tug. Now I'm going to keep doing that, going up and down, making these stitches all about the same size, paying attention to which direction I need to go, and always being safe and keeping my fingers out of the way. Poking that down again. And I'm going to keep sewing on that fabric until I've completed one line or until I've used up my whole entire piece of yarn. So let's pretend for a second that I have used up my whole entire piece of yarn and I'm ready to tuck it under on the back. So that's another skill on our stitching checklist. We were just stitching on our fabric, and now we're going to be tucking our yarn under on the back. Now this is another thing that we don't want shown on the front because we want to keep our fabric looking nice and neat. So when my yarn is short and I'm done with that sewing, I'm going to flip the whole thing over to the back. Now if I just took a scissors and I cut this off right here, somebody would be able to pull on this knot and pull out all that work that I just did. So I want to make sure that somebody wouldn't be able to do that. So this is where that tucking under on the back comes in. So I take my needle and I lay it flat. And I'm just going to slide that sewing needle under a couple of my stitches. So with a running stitch like this, I need to do it one at a time. So I slide that under one, sliding it under a second stitch, and maybe a third or fourth stitch just to be safe. Okay, so tucking that all underneath those stitches. I don't have to tie any knots. If you have a little bit of extra string there, all we need to do is cut that off. Then I would just go grab my next piece of yarn, tie that double knot, and then I could start right where I left off. So just like before, I want to start by coming up from the back, pulling that through till my knot hits, going down, and pulling that through until I have my first stitch. Okay, so if you look at the back of my fabric, you can see that all of my knots, all of my tucking under, my name, everything's on the back of my fabric. So when I flip this over, all I see is my nice, neat stitches. Good luck.